Hi guys, today we are doing a video for you about overtraining. So I'm just going to I'm going to let Dan introduce himself to you, as you guys don't know him, but you've probably heard me talking about him. So over to you.
So yeah, my name's Dan. I'm a personal trainer. Overtraining really comes in my territory quite a lot. Me and Hannah have spoke about it before, so I thought it would be a good opportunity to talk about some tools that we could use. I've been doing personal training I've been passed for 6 years, or 5 years I've been passed for, and probably best part of a year to 18 months I've been solely on my own, fatigue management, that's one of the tools we're talking about. Overtraining is very much on my radar, so yeah, I think having a conversation about it today will just have us both openly talking about it, so you guys gain a further understanding, not just hearing the fancy term fatigue management and all the other things that we're going to talk about today to protect you from overtraining. I think will really kind of help you. But yeah, my world is very much bodybuilding, but I really do that from getting people stronger and to move really well in big functional movements like squat, dead, bench, those kind of movements, and getting them moving well, kind of like a powerlifting approach, or a functional powerlifting approach to bodybuilding is probably best describes what I do. And yeah, that's it, I think.
Yeah. I was like, Dan is the man that has, when I refer to my husband as cheating on me with another personal trainer, it is Dan. So yeah, obviously working with me for so long, especially during these times of lockdown where we haven't had access to so many big weights, Zand had actually lost quite a bit of muscle mass, so he's done a kind of condensed program that's purely around those things that then it's going to help him to become a more powerful athlete. So we kind of teamed up. But, this is the face of the man that I keep mentioning.
Yeah, I mean, like say Xander, it was a real condensed 6 weeks, and fortunately, Hannah gave me the floor and said, Xander and Hannah gave me the floor and said, just, do whatever's best. And we did whatever's best, and it worked well. But certainly for someone like Xander, who, for some people, some of the things we're going to discuss today isn't that important. But for someone like Xander, who is pretty well established from the get-go, fatigue management, managing load over the week, managing, intensity, a lot of the things we're going to discuss today was crazy important, and I don't think that we would have seen strength or muscle mass or any things that we saw increase.
So yeah, I call these things like the 1%ers. So the things that are really kind of top end, that are actually going to make quite a big difference to you. But if you're looking for just the kind of basis of when should I take a rest, maybe you're a beginner, maybe you're getting back into training, we've both done things. I've done a blog that you can find on my website or on Instagram. Dan has done a lot of things about kind of recognizing when you need to take a rest, whether it's just, am I feeling whether I need to train today, or am I being lazy? All of those things you'll find there. This video in particular is the top end, that 1%er. If you're taking your training really seriously, this is how you're gonna kind of give your body the rest you need to make those gains later.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, and hopefully you're gonna have some understanding of actually literal tools that you can apply, because I find, especially in this space, people kind of have so much if you feel overworked, just rest. That's just not tangible enough. And it's the same with people normally find themselves in that situation, because if they're not getting results, people say work harder. And none of that's very tangible. How much harder do you work? How much rest do you take? None of that's helpful. In my eyes, it's a bit I don't know, move more and eat less scenario that everybody kind of...
Yes, the good old vague term.
Yeah. So helpful. How much more, how much less would probably be the best place to start. I'm hoping that we can, just really educate people on exactly tools to apply to overtraining. And one of the words that me and Hannah will talk about a lot today is fatigue management. And that kind of encompasses all these tools that we're going to talk about. And fatigue management is a huge subject, really. There's so many elements to it. But I think really we're going to cover a big part of it with some of the tools.
Yeah, and I was because it's so big that we could literally talk about this for hours. So we've got to just kind of pick out a couple of tools. So I've gone down like a really kind of scientific route that I have mentioned before. So I'm going to cover heart rate variability, and Dan is going to cover a tool that I had never heard of before that he uses with his own training and with his clients.
Yeah, it's called just biofeedback, and yeah, I mean, I can start right away and explain what that is if you want.
Shoot.
So, biofeedback, it's an interesting one because people who hear it probably think it's quite la-di-da-y, kind of like, I don't know, it's not got no tangible way of recognising, it's a bit like eat less and move more kind of thing. I think it's quite, I don't know, but if you actually apply it correctly and apply it well and frequent, it's an absolute brilliant tool. And I started using it, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago with my clients, and then not thoroughly, not across the board, and then now it's like across the board it has to happen. I think that, and it doesn't matter if you're serious or someone that's really competitive, I think it goes across the board as a usable tool. And basically what it is it's called biofeedback because it's you're asking yourself for feedback, and they're normally biomarkers. So like stuff like, how hungry are you on a scale of 1 to 10? And hunger's a massive one because we've demonised hunger for a very long time. And when clients, I put them on more food normally, quite often people come to me and I normally make them eat more, which is a separate discussion in itself. But they go, oh, I feel so hungry. And I'm like, yeah, good, that's healthy, you know what I mean? If your hunger disappears, it's not a good thing, you know what I mean? That's survival right there. So, and yeah, so rating yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 with hunger and checking in regular that hunger's not dwindling down, because a massive sign of overtraining, and I hear it all the time, is I'm just not hungry anymore. I'm just not hungry. I'm just never hungry. I'm like, yeah. Then like you probe some other questions, which is, is performance going down? And they're like, well, I've not really got stronger in a while. I'm like, okay, how was your sleep? And they go, well, I'm struggling to sleep, but I'm like, and then all of a sudden we've painted a picture that, yeah, because your hunger was down, we know that, things are slipping the wrong way. And so hunger's one of them. Another big one is sleep. You recover when you sleep. For a long time, the more, like, I don't know, not that it's been, people reward themselves for sleeping less. And as far as I'm concerned,
food and sleep.
Yeah. Like, if you eat less and sleep less, for some reason it makes you more superior. I would actually say the opposite.
It's completely the opposite. You don't want to see what I'm like with little food and no sleep.
Yeah, and it also, back to having a healthy, sustainable diet, having no sleep dictates a lot of your decisions.
Yeah.
If you're managing on 4 hours sleep, like, don't expect to have a healthy diet. You might get away with it for a couple of days, but it's like your then hunt for sugar is just heightened, you know what I mean? Your body's just craving something naughty. I always use the example, it's, if we're binge watching Netflix late at night, right, and it's 12 o'clock, say, at night, and when you're a bit peckish, you your instant choice isn't, broccoli and asparagus out of the fridge. When you're tired and groggy, right, it's like sugar, crappy food, and that's the same if you're missing sleep several nights. Like, one night ain't gonna hurt you, but if you think that six hours sleep every night is gonna be good for optimal training, like, and some people have no choice, like, I do get it, but if they can address sleep. And so rating that on a scale of 1 to 10, back to the biofeedback, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being, you're getting 8-9 hours good quality sleep, you're sleeping like an angel, you're waking up feeling refreshed, like, and 1 being you can't sleep at all, or you're very what's the term when people can't sleep? I forget what the condition's called.
Insomnia,
yeah. You're basically an insomniac. You're getting no hour's sleep or an hour's sleep. So that would be 1. And like, if you're ever less than a 5, like, you need to address that. Like, forget training. Like I'm not interested in how much you train at that point. Like, absolutely forget it. So we've covered hunger, sleep, motivation, stress. So motivation, if motivation's always dwindling, and now even, Hannah probably trains more athletes than I do, people that are more competitive. But even in someone that's competitive, like, motivation can dwindle.
I would be worried if that marker was an 8 with athletes, or I would call them like the people that take whatever they're doing very seriously. So if you're, I don't know, a tennis player and you don't want to go to train, and that could be an 8 for them, that is a worry, because you would expect, I would expect it should be 10 every time.
Agreed. And here's the thing, like, this is where biofeedback maybe gets its criticism, or can be a bit wishy-washy, but it's when you check all of them that it's important. Because you've got some people that, like, I hate to say this, but I feel like I'm always motivated. I feel like I'm always, especially when it comes to training, part of that fact is I enjoy it so much. So, you know what I mean? I could, whether it's ideal or not, I could have 4 hours sleep and go train. Because motivation for me isn't an issue. Now, does that mean that's always right? And I've been in a situation where I have been overtraining and I've just been continuously getting 5-6 hours sleep every night and still training several weeks on end. And I've been checking that only measure myself and going, yeah, I'm motivated actually. I'm a 9 out of 10 motivation. And really all that is that's this cloud of glaze, because I'm so motivated on the goal in front of whatever it is at the time. And a good example I can feel, one that I can really think of and resonate with, was when I was doing a lot of running and I was training for the rat race, and I was putting in some serious miles every week. Like some of my finished weeks were like 30-40 miles a week, along with some of the stuff in the gym. And I was overtraining. Not that the amount of mileage was overtraining, is that I was then coupling that with I was doing a physical manual labour job at the time, and so the only thing I didn't know about biofeedback at the time, but the only thing that I thought was important was, am I feeling motivated? And I was always motivated, so that was enough of a cue for me to go, right, let's train harder.
But equally, do you think you were just going through the motions?
Oh, yeah. So, you probably brought up a massive interesting point there, is that I was going through the motions, and I was just like high on endorphins all the time.
Yeah.
So that because in actual fact, there was times, if I was asking myself honestly, where I didn't want to run, but because the love for being better and the love for being like as the best on the day of the race was like clouding this motivation and telling me that I was 10 motivation. When in actual fact, if I was to ask myself honestly, like to go run 10, it was at the winter as well, I was doing a lot of my training, to go out and do 10 miles in the freezing cold, like there was nothing exciting about that.
No.
And that's the thing, especially if you're an athlete, this is a real big one, is if you're not, like, you might feel motivated during the training and after the training because the endorphins are high and you love what you do. But if before your training you're having to drag yourself to the gym just because you're one of them crazy disciplined people, that's a bad sign. And that's what I was like. I was just dragging myself to the gym every time, or the miles on the road, if it were. But I was just like, because I had that super discipline, like it was just a cloud of misunderstanding really, and I was literally 100% overdoing it. So it's using them all. So I think I've covered motivation enough now.
Yeah.
So you've got motivation. Sex drive's a massive player. I think that no one likes to talk about it. It's not something easy to talk about with clients, I suppose. I find it tough to talk with clients. But the beautiful thing about, especially as a tool for yourself, is you don't have to have the conversation with anybody.
No.
You go, scale of 1 to 10. And this is another thing. Some guys will say, oh, I'm always a 9 or 10. But what's great is if you ask them the question and you do it repeatedly, and 6 weeks later they've gone from a 9 or 10 to a 7, not enough for concern, right? Because a 7's, depending who you're asking, is not that bad. But actually, we might have picked up on something before it got worse. And this is the beautiful thing about biofeedback, and when it comes tangible, because they go, oh, my hunger's gone from a 8 to a 7. Okay, maybe not enough for concern. It might just be stress has increased or whatever. So, okay. But then, okay, actually stress has increased. So stress being another one. Stress has gone from, 10 is always high. Stress has gone from a 4 or 5 where they like to be because they run a business and they actually don't mind being a little bit stressed, to a 6, and you're like, okay, stress has come up a bit. And you go, quality of sleep's gone from sleeping beautiful 8 or 9 to now it's a 6 or 7. And these are all not crazy concerning, but and then they go, then they've gone from being like a horny rabbit to being, to being a 7 or 8, right? And they're like, yeah, my sex drive's still high, I'm fine. And then you go, actually, wait a minute, your hunger's down a little bit, sex drive's down a little bit, your stress is that little bit higher, which is stress is the other big one, quality of sleep's down a notch, and now you can go, right, okay, we've been doing this training program 6 weeks, and then it coincides with everything else you're doing. Every week we've got that little bit heavier, and maybe that's appropriate. Maybe they're supposed to feel a little bit run down, a little bit tough at this point, because it might be in their final week in a block, but at least you understand why. And it's knowing why is the important bit, because if they're in a 6-week block and they tell me I'm feeling a little bit soreness is another variable that I like to use.
Yeah.
And this whole picture is painted, and I'm like, right, okay. I might even say to them, don't worry, it's expected. Just ride it out to the end of the week. Next week we're going to have a deload. And that might be then appropriate. But the point is like, we understood when, and like the protocol to then step in at the appropriate time. It's not that like all these things aren't wrong. Like if you're doing hard training, it's usual to feel sore. It's usual to maybe, especially if you're running a business, and you love training hard, juggling both of those is tough. Like it just is. But then, and expecting stress to never get higher because of it, like you'd be stupid to think that. Even as an athlete, like not all athletes, like are lucky enough to do that as a full-time job, get paid for. They have other commitments. Even if it's not work, it might be family.
It's exactly that.
You mean?
And that's what, coming back to the kind of the sleep one, if you think about an athlete, they're like, if they're lucky enough, like we said, that this is their full-time job, their whole life is around that training session that day. So I would expect them to be putting in a decent nap in the day. I mean, how 100%. Many people can be saying that they can do that tangibly? Not many.
Yeah.
So just think, if you're really like putting in that really hard training session, like an athlete would be napping then.
100%.
And coming back to the sleep point, that I think it's kind of really important to think that, I don't know if anybody else has had this, when they've done a really tough session and then you've gone to bed that night thinking, oh, I'm just going to collapse and just drift off to sleep. And you've had the worst night's sleep. Like for me, I'm super sweaty, I'm starving hungry. Like, you know instantly, right, I pushed it too far in that session.
And I think not only does that show you that, you know, in that one session it was bad, but that gives you a direct implication of, if you were to consecutively do that several weeks in a row, like, you're getting bad night's sleep, like, back off, and it's hard. The reason it's hard, and I think from, you know, a lot of my audience and the people that train with me come from a position of, like, I don't know, Arnold Schwarzenegger's the figure, right? And if you listen to any motivational speeches he says, you know,
and this can only some like cheesy catchphrases now.
Yeah, I'm going to say a cheesy catchphrase that he says, and it's my favourite one. He goes, I'm going to try to do it in the voice that he does. This is awful if I'm doing this, but he says, and I know a lot of you out there are saying, oh God, I'm going to stop actually. I'm going to stop because that sounded so bad. I just listened to myself. But anyway, he says, I know a lot of you out there are going, what does he say? He says, and you should sleep 6 hours, so you now have 18 hours of the day that are remaining, you know, for work, hobbies and whatever. And let me tell you, I've been there, done it, got the t-shirt. 6 hours sleep, if you're into hard training. Like right now, in fact, Colin, if he ever sees this, I've got a client, Colin, right? He's just had a newborn. He's lucky if he gets 6 hours sleep, right? But he doesn't want to back off on his training. So we've now got to manage, which is just some of the things we're going to talk about today, is the volume and the intensity. And maybe for him, you know, he's going to get 6 hours sleep. Like, if he's lucky, you know, he's just had a newborn. But, like, if if you're, you know what I mean, that shouldn't happen all the time. That's not normal, and Colin understands that that's not normal. It's a time frame. But something, you know, if you were listening to you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger, like, he's a massive role model for people.
The ultimate motivational speaker.
I mean, and I hate to slag him off, right? But there's probably certainly one reason why he was recovering faster than everybody else, and he would always say the other line, the other line is, he goes, and for those people, I just say sleep faster. And I'm like, sleep faster is the best line I've ever heard in my life. Like, because he says it on this big talk, and I've heard that speech a million times, and some of the stuff is really good. But for me, I can't get on board with 6 hours sleep and sleeping faster, because, like, and sometimes if you were actually to ask yourself, if you have a bad night's sleep, that would be sleeping slowly, and I'd say have another hour's kip, you know what I mean? Like, that's what you need.
I would love to know how to sleep faster.
I know, it'd be the best superpower in the world.
It would, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so that...
I'm still laughing at Dan's Arnold Schwarzenegger.
At least I stopped whilst I was ahead. I could have carried on, which is...
Well, stop while you were ahead, or stop while you were behind.
Just stop completely.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, so... and I think that especially my audience come from that position.
Yeah. And
a lot of the time I have to say, I'm like, guys, stop glamorizing not sleeping. I'm like, look, if I don't, like, I hate getting 7 hours sleep. Like, 7 hours sleep is really my base minimum. If I get 6 hours sleep, I'm upset. And it won't be very often that I will train on 6 hours sleep if it's important in the week. And I'll just make a mental note that later I'm either going to go for a nap, or I'm just like, right, if I don't perform that well today, it's because I've got 6 hours sleep. But yeah, I mean, every day I like to get 8 hours sleep. 8 hours is my at least, really.
I mean, you can really tell how important from this video, food and sleep are to us.
Yeah. and it's like, it's the things that, like, are demonised, man. It's bad.
Yeah, I know. It's like, sleep is sexy, everybody. Like, we love it.
It's the best thing ever, yeah.
Yeah, I'm a 10 hours girl if I can. I mean, and 100%. That is some serious sleeping. I
know, yeah. And this is, like, I don't know, but, like, well, yeah, it boils back down to, you know what I mean, this fundamental is sleep and you know what I mean, recovery.
And you're trying to use all of these to create a picture. So then you can know what's your normal and then see those anomalies. And like Dan said, spotting things before they become a problem. Because Dan's numbers are going to be different to my numbers when we're both feeling at our absolute prime. So it doesn't work across the board. You need to kind of use these to know what your normal is. And then you can see, actually, like, my motivation is normally a 9, but suddenly it's a 5.
Yeah. And it's... And the beautiful thing, like, the reason I say the biofeedback's good, if you can, like, as a tool to track in on yourself, they're amazing. If you've got that self-aware, and just ask yourself honestly, like, you're asking yourself, it's not a problem, just, you know what I mean, have the conversation, and if you can write them down, like, and actually check in with them weekly, they become so tangible, and if, I mean, as a coach, I wish I learnt that tool way back when I first started. I think that, I'm not saying it's a game changer, but it certainly paints a big picture. And it also, if there's any coaches that are listening to this, sometimes it's hard, like, Hannah will definitely relate to this, it's hard to tell a client to not train. Like, that conversation, like, way back when, if somebody would say to me, Dan, you're overdoing it, you need a rest, my probably instant response is, like, and this sounds so awful, I remember saying it to several people, it'd be like, I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about, like, you know, I just love training hard, like, you mean if you train, like, you know what I mean, training hard is, like, the only thing that's important, and I think back to something we're going to talk about in a bit, but I think for a very long time, I was training suboptimal all the time.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest principle, is, like, it's hard training. It's the hardest training, not all the time, and that's important, but it's the hardest training that you can do that really gets results. That's overload. And if you're always training suboptimal, slightly less rest, slightly less recovery is dampened because you're not eating enough food. Your recovery is dampened because you're not sleeping enough. Do you think you can go in and do all-time best PRs, which is what's going to lead to the most adaptation, working suboptimal all the time?
No.
So, yeah, not happening. So yeah. So yeah, I think I got quite passionate there.
Yeah, this is Dan. This is what Dan does. Dan gets very passionate, which is like the thing why I love him. That there's nobody that is more passionate about his job than him.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks.
No, you're very welcome. But yes, I think this is going to be a game changer for me and my clients. Fear is a big driver when we talk about rest. That it's the fear of what happens if I don't put this session in. Am I not going to achieve this? Am I not going to get those results? That it's a useful tool that you can see, and you can see it yourself, to know actually, then if I take that rest and my numbers get higher, and then hopefully we build that picture up. And also at the end of the day, whatever it is you're training for, whether it's size, losing weight, a competition, a half marathon, that you get the goal at the end and you can see that rest is good. Rest shouldn't be demonized like sleep 100%. And food, and that you can do this and feel confident about it in the future. Yeah.
I mean, I could talk forever about kind of the learning curves I've had in my own training, of like how, and I think people need to understand this. You know what I mean? Like I love to think of myself as like a practitioner of what I do. Like I really, if anything I can take like from my coaching is that like I try to practice what I preach as much as possible, and like that's it. I'm a practitioner of what I do, and I've been there, got the t-shirt. Believe me, I've been there, got the t-shirt. Listened to a Arnold Schwarzenegger motivation. I don't know my audio feel like it's playing up there. It's not. Listened to an Arnold Schwarzenegger motivation and him saying, rest sleep 6 hours a day, train every day, train 5 hours. Like I've listened to that and done it, got the t-shirt, and believe me, it got me nowhere. Like I remember when I first started training, I trained twice a day, every day for 6 months. This is when I first started training, but that was my answer for me not getting results. Because I thought, and people need to listen to this, because I've been there and got this, like had this happen to me, of like me not getting results and thinking, the beginner gains I don't get the beginner gains anymore, so now the only option is to train twice as hard, because the more training I can do, of course, that means I'm going to get more results. And I remember it might have been 6 months, I don't know, but I remember training twice a day for at least 6 or 7 days a week, and doing it every day, and trying to do what I thought was overloading training, but back to the whole, it was suboptimal. Not even probably suboptimal, there was that much fatigue present, and I was just riddled with like aches and pains, and I would just ignore them. Like I would just ignore all signs of fatigue, and I would just smash myself through more and more training and more training. And there'd be times where, like, at the start of my session, my pec might be hurting, but I would carry on benching, and by the end of the session, the endorphins were masking all this pain, and I'd be like, my mind was just telling me I was weak. My mind was just telling me I was sore, and now I feel fine. Like I was just high, totally high off endorphins. And 6 months passed by, and I didn't hit one PB, I didn't hit one PR, I didn't look any better, I didn't put on any muscle mass, and I just remember feeling so demotivated and thinking, where am I going wrong? And there has to be a smarter way. And I think, years down the line, like I've moulded some tools, and one of them being biofeedback. Yeah. So.
And it's also important to remember that this is marketing. So, like Arnold Schwarzenegger is trying to create a persona that people will buy into.
Yeah.
It's the same with those horrible slogans we see that. I've seen so many bad ones in bad gyms, and actually also gyms to a certain effect. When you go into those classes, you get the class instructors, and I'm really not like demonizing class instructors. There's loads of brilliant ones out there.
Yeah,
but
sure.
You're doing more than one class a day. That is too many classes.
Yeah.
You're either not putting enough effort into that first class, or this is why they want you to go into all of these things. They want you to be there as much as possible. But it is marketing. Like, there's a reason why they're doing that, because they want to sell you something. They want you to buy into that. And that might not necessarily be the best thing for you.
Yeah. I mean, exactly that. I think also it's this we're in the business of, like, people picking up other people's system and doing what's, you know what I mean? Like, because so-and-so does it, that's the right program.
Yeah.
I think we've covered biofeedback. I think I've gone way off over the. I think everybody knows that now what it is.
I mean, we love it, Dan. Digressing, is that a word?
Yeah.
It is. Well, it is now. If it's not, he digresses and we like it. We got a little story. So, as we already said,
sometimes I sweat when I talk. I'm not even joking.
So I'm going to talk about heart rate variability. So I did a blog about when you should rest, and kind of sort of mentioned this, and people were like, oh, can I have some more information about this? So just stick with me for the first bit, because it is a bit sciencey. There's biology in this, but we're really talking about the autonomic system in your body. So that is the thing that most of you know. I have a health condition that's my autonomic system is in failure that causes these things. So your autonomic system does everything that you don't know about. So you don't have to think about it. So your heart rate, your breathing, digestion, temperature control, blood pressure, all those things that we call like homeostasis that keep us going, that there is no thought process. Which is so cool. Yeah, I mean, it is. The brain is just a supercomputer that...
It's mental, yeah.
The more you think about it, the more you're like, how is this happening? But yeah, that is the main thing and we're talking about this in terms of heart rate. So the autonomic system controls your heart rate. Now, the autonomic system is split into two parts. So there's the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. Now, the parasympathetic is the bit we're concentrating on today, and in particular, fight and flight. So that bit controls your fight or flight that most of us have heard about. So it's a caveman thing. A lion comes into your cave. Are you going to freeze or are you going to run away? So it's something that we have developed as we've evolved to keep us alive. But now we're in like the 21st century, and there is no lion coming into our cave. It does come about, so anxiety, like, so if anybody has an anxiety disorder, you go into fight or flight. Stress at work, we all have had it. And in particular, I like to say this about people's start of their run. So you'll get out of your house, do your little warm up, start running, and normally the first 2 minutes are pretty horrible. That is fight or flight. Your body is deciding, am I going to stop or am I going to keep going and push through this? And the hope is when you're running that you push through it. However, obviously, it's okay to stop if that feels appropriate to you.
Yeah, sure.
So there's a part of our brain, the hypothalamus, that controls all this, sends signals to the rest of our body to either stimulate or relax. A good example of this, again, going back to running, is runner's belly. So digestion while we're running is not essential. So if anybody gets upset stomachs when they're running, this is why, and it's completely normal. I mean, Paula Radcliffe will tell you the same.
Yeah.
That it's because, digestion is not essential. This is when we're just pushing ourselves right to the limit. So unfortunately, runner's stomach can be a pretty adverse side effect of that. But again, it's just our body kind of fine-tuning itself, like keeping us going and helping us push. Now, this is where we come to the heart rate side of it. That is, so see, we've covered the fight or flight. Now, when we talk about heart rate variability, a lot of variability is good. So that kind of seems a bit counterintuitive. Low variability is bad. So we would expect, so if you're sat down watching a film or in bed, your heart rate should be fairly low. You're at rest. However, if you are watching a film and it's tense, your heart rate should come up and then it should go back down again. With your training, you never, so even if in a HIIT workout where you're kind of at your top level, you don't stay at that top level during your workout. It goes up and down. Now, if you are tired, you're ill, you're stressed, fatigued, your heart rate will naturally be a lot higher, and equally, it won't fluctuate as much. So that's kind of the crux of it all. So heart rate variability, we're looking at the gaps between your heart rate. The gold standard of that is looking at an ECG. That's what we would do with athletes in a lab. But now we've all, well, most of us, if we're lucky enough, have smart watches, phones that do this stuff, where you obviously can't take an ECG. I mean, the new Apple Watch does, but it's the equivalent of a 1 lead, which is very unreliable. I mean, there's a lot of people ask me about this. So even a 4 lead is not a gold standard. 6 lead is what you'd have in hospital. So you can imagine how unreliable 1 lead is in comparison to that.
How does that? How does that impact on the actual accuracy of it, though?
It's
1 lead and 6 lead.
It's all to do with points. So a 6 lead, they're putting it on points of the body.
Oh, so 6 different points.
6 different points to get.
There we are.
Yeah. So obviously 1 point on your wrist is not...
Ah, that makes sense, yeah. No,
yeah, it's a great tool, but it's not... We would never use that for diagnosis.
Yeah,
So
sure.
it's the same with your heart rate. I say that it's a good thing that it's consistently inaccurate, because I wouldn't expect to wear a heart rate monitor and it say the same thing as my watch. And in fact, I do know that my watch is wrong because I have a pacemaker, that actually it can't go below a certain point, and sometimes my watch is telling me my heart rate is below a certain point, but it's always consistently wrong, which is great. So yeah, we all have those, and then that, like Dan's biofeedback, builds a picture up over time. You know how long it generally takes you to rest, you know what generally your resting heart rate is, your walking heart rate. Now if you can see that it's higher than normal, or it's not fluctuating as much as normal, I mean, on the Apple Watch, you get a graph during the day of where your heart rate is. You also get it during workouts. You can see the variability there. Now, if there's little variability, then you know, actually, am I ill? Have I had not enough sleep? Am I overtraining?
Yeah. These, like, I mean, we could be overtraining, but...
we could be overtraining, but it could be any of those other things. So the fight or flight, like we said, it could be that you're really stressed and you're stressed for a prolonged period of time. But equally, that gives you the information to be able to go and address that.
That's what I'm saying. It's not all that these are all, like you say, that's a perfect opportunity to say, it's not all like that. This is the wrong way. Like you must be overtraining if your heart rate's elevated. Like if you're experiencing stress at work or whatever, but that's still a sign that maybe you should back off of your training.
Yeah.
Like just because it's not the training that's the problem doesn't mean that it can't be the solution. Like you could easily, like when clients come to me and I'm like, they're having a stressed out week at work, like it makes sense to at least reduce their training if they're, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, mentioning Colin earlier, like he doesn't train as often as other people do because he's recovering a lot less. You know what I mean? And there's that opportunity to adjust his training based on one of the, the variables of the heart rate.
So, like when Dan's talking about he's been there and done that. So for me, as I was starting to get ill, I could not recognise that I was ill. I thought, I'm getting unfit, I need to train more. And this cycle went on for probably, if I'm honest, about 6 months. So I thought, my performance was going down, my times weren't as good. I was like stressed at university and I thought, these things are coming down, I need to train more. And then eventually this did come to a head, which I will talk about. But if I had been able to recognise earlier that this, and not been stuck in this cycle of pushing myself more and more, I could have gone to the doctors and said, actually, do you know what? I'm really struggling. I am tired more than I should be. My performance is down. I could have kind of recognised and checked in with myself rather than been stuck in this, I need to push harder and harder and harder, and then eventually, have a cardiac arrest and end up in hospital. And we're talking about the very extreme end of this. Like this, I don't expect this to happen to anybody else, but we are talking about, because I had a health condition that I didn't know about, but it probably shouldn't have got to that point.
But I think as well, like you say, that means that you can at least understand the mindset of it. When you're someone that's like, because you know what I mean, you had this like, why my performance down? it seems so counterintuitive. Like now thinking back, to push harder. Like actually, if you think about, training is to improve on something. You have to be in an optimal environment. So not all. Don't get me wrong. There might be some fatigue present when you've got a whole week of training. Like that's normal. Like you can't expect to do one session and totally recover 24 hours later. Like, but with some clever structure of programming, there should be at least some way of doing it fairly optimal week to week. But like thinking about it now, like it seems so clear to me, and I'm sure that you're that side of the fence now, that it's like, why did I just carry on pushing harder? Like, why didn't I just go, wait a minute, like connect the dots?
Yeah.
But when you're so motivated, sometimes it's so clouding. Like it's so like you start to like not listen to basic shit. Like you're not sleeping well, and your performance is just like so poor. Like take a break. Fuck.
Yeah, and it's also the performance pathways. So this is still quite new stuff that we're discovering to do with when to rest. That 5 years ago we were still pushing our clients, our athletes, to their absolute breaking point, because that's where we felt that the gains were made. That we break someone down and then push them up. And then as more and more time has come past, we're like, actually, this was the wrong approach. That this is why it's still so counterintuitive to a lot of people, because even to athletes, this is only 5 years old.
It's new. Yeah,
it's very, very new. So coaches, even at top end, are still trying to get their head around recognizing these things. So we've kind of tried to give you a couple of tools that are more tangible and easier for you to see, rather than relying on your own mental state of not wanting to push, not wanting to quit.
100%. And I think the heart rate monitor, it's something that not everybody. I mean, I've not got an Apple Watch actually, but
no. But not everybody will. But
it's certainly a really easy thing you can apply.
Yeah, it's not as I said, I didn't want to bog you down, but you did need to understand why this happened.
It's important to know
why,
yeah.
But you don't need to know any more than that to know why your heart rate varies.
Something you touched on that I think actually might be helpful, and I was thinking about asking the question, but I don't want to interrupt.
Okay.
Is you mentioned homeostasis, about this is the point where your body's always trying to return to. Now, I'll let you go into more detail, but people, homeostasis, you eat a piece of bread, it's digesting that piece of bread, and it's trying to return back to sugars stable. And there's all forms of really where your body's the happiest, homeostasis, but one is resting heart rate. And if your homeostasis is always elevated, there's always that. Well, it's a sign that they're overtraining.
Yeah.
That must mean. I'm connecting the dots here. No. You just tell me. That must mean that those two, and it makes a lot of sense now. Now you've said it, that it coincides with anxiety being that little bit higher constantly, because their heart rate's constantly elevated.
Higher. So the easiest way I kind of think about it is a thermostat in your house, that you've decided what that optimal temperature is for your house. So say, I don't know, I found out the other day that my client likes their house at 24 degrees. I know, ours is like 15 degrees, the heating comes on. But there we go. So you set it, so if ours is 15, the heating comes on at 15, that's quite cold, just so we know. Then the heating comes on. If it goes over that, it turns itself off. That is just a more simplified version of what our body does. So, Dan said you eat a piece of bread, then our insulin spikes to digest that bit of bread, but then it goes down. Because we're then back at that optimal level of where we should be. And then exactly, it's just the thermostat is a kind of easy way for you to picture in your head what your body is doing. However, we can have all these optimal levels, but if there's a lot going on, we're never going to be back at that optimal level.
Brilliant. Yeah, agreed. I think that a tool that both of us can talk about and is the actual programming.
Yes.
And how you know, because something I'd love to hear from you actually is fatigue management, what it looks like for an athlete.
Yes.
You know, you've got a basketballer with several different elements to their training. You know, yes, they want to play basketball at the best level, but in order to do that, they better be fast. They better be cardiovascular fit. They better be powerful to hit the ring. You know what I mean? And there's all these elements. How do you then find progression in those elements? You know what I mean? Because at some point, you know what I mean, well, they need to get better. That's kind of why they're seeing a coach. But how do you, in order to do that, how do you manage fatigue in order to get them better?
Yeah, so a really good question. I think we'd kind of touched me and Dan about this before when he was asking me about Xander's training, because obviously he's doing a very condensed, focused bit of training on strength. Now, obviously, like Dan said, with athletes, you need all of the fundamental elements of fitness to be at your top level. So that's agility, obviously cardiovascular fitness, flexibility. I could go on and on about them all. You need to make sure that they're in there. So there's sessions are split a lot of the time. I mean, when we talk about plyometrics, so jumping things, you don't want to overload your athlete with that. So doing a half and half session with plyometrics and strength is a really good split. The more plyometrics you do, the more likely you are to get injured. ACLs, so cruciate ligament in your knee, that's a big one that will go. Sorry, Dan, interrupt me.
No, I'm not trying to interrupt, actually. I think there's a good question there that I think would be interesting for people to hear. So, you know, I saw that you gave the example of doing the strength and the plyometrics in the same session.
Yes.
Would that be to keep a lot of the intensity in that same section of the week?
Yes. So we can obviously want intensity to be fairly high in some of our sessions. However, I would never recommend anybody do an hour when it's a training session, not competition, of plyometrics. It's far too many. We don't want to be doing more than 1,000 jumps in a session. Now that seems like a really high number, but if you said 30 box jumps, 30, it soon is up to a there. And if you're with somebody who's training for an hour and a half, actually plyometrics and strength are split very well. They're very suited together because we can push both of those because we're not using the same energy group and still be able to train at the top level by doing two hard things at once, as long as we're obviously giving ourselves a big rest in between. Because strength, I mean, you can even, it's not really supersetting, but most of us know it as that term. We could equally do squats and then do box jumps. Now, you probably wouldn't do those back to back for an athlete, but you can do your squats, have a nice long break, and then do your box jumps. And you're still hitting the same thing, but you're giving yourself that rest.
And working pretty optimally in both.
Exactly. I mean, you can always do it in completely different things. I mean, you could do a shoulder press and a box jump. Then you know that you're not overloading the same muscle group.
Either or, yeah.
But you can do it in any ways. I mean, I really mix that up with my training myself and for my athletes, that we're not always working in the same way, because that's a good way for us to not adapt to, not get too used to that training style. So I always want them to be in a little bit of stress. So that might mean that some days we're doing giant sets, some days we're doing super sets, some days we're just doing the good old classic, you're going to do 3 sets of this.
Yeah.
Because I don't want them, I constantly want their body to be adapting to what I'm throwing at it, and for them not to completely plateau in that kind of training method. Now, I did a damn there and got into one thing.
did it me?
Yeah, but when we talk about periodization, which is your training plan, now for athletes, there's normally something that their end goal is a cycle. So the Olympics, for example, is a 4-year cycle. Now for other people, it could be just 6 weeks. So an off season, you've got 6 weeks before you go back into competition. So you need to know how long you've got before your point, and that can differ massively from person to person. Now carry on.
No, I mean, that message that you just said there, I don't think enough people hear that.
No.
Like, because they don't use that. I mean, I have that conversation with people all the time, and I think you've just explained it, that nobody actually goes, like, uses their time wisely and look at, like, this is, you know, like, actually structure my training around this event. And I think that if somebody, it's just people just took that message, they would get actually much better results.
Yeah, and when we're talking about, so I would still program slightly differently. So if I'm looking at an off-season period, and then still thinking about, okay, so it's an athlete that then in a year is going to the World Championships, something like that. I'm still going to focus on that off-season as its own separate training form, because I can put in a ton of intensity in that and not worry so much about overtraining, because they don't have the same level of training for whatever their discipline is, and they don't have the same competition level. So kind of football, those kind of things are really good examples of that, because you'll have your training with your strength and conditioning coach, and then you'll also have your skills session, so with your football coach, with whatever it is, and then you'll have your game whenever that is. So I don't have to worry when I'm programming somebody during an off season that they're going to have 3 training sessions on their skills, and they're also going to have a match.
Yeah.
When you add those things in, that you have to factor in a lot more rest than you would in the off season.
So, as an have you got any, like, if we took a more tangible example for
Yeah,
you,
yeah.
say you had a footballer, you know, he played on the Saturday, in his games on the Saturday, how would you then program them in season? Like, is there ways that you could distribute that fatigue, you know, for them? Because obviously you don't want to be disturbing their football if they go in,
No.
you know, with like DOMs from their leg session on a Friday night, you know what I mean?
So yeah, so if it's just like a Saturday footballer that you just turn up and play, then you don't want to be doing anything on Friday that's really physically taxing, and you don't want to be doing anything on the Sunday that's really physically taxing. I mean, Sunday should be like your pajama day, really. And then Saturday, preferably on the Friday, I would say to people that that's probably the day that you want to work on flexibility, which I talk about a lot, that, you know, again, is not very fashionable, but I promise you, if you focus on this, you'll gain in sports, in strength. So yoga is a really good one, because everybody can just go onto YouTube and get a yoga video. Pilates, you can do that. You don't have the same recovery tax that you would need for something else, that you can do that before. And then you want your hardest session to be Tuesday or Wednesday.
So, and why is that?
So for the fact that you've got a lot of rest, like before, so after your game and then before your game, where when I say rest, you don't need to completely rest. You can then, so me and Dan talk about this a lot, about having your hardest session, but the ones before that and the ones after it complement your hardest session.
Agreed, yeah.
So it's weight is a really good example, that we're going to warm up on the day before by trying to get up to that weight, and then on the hardest day we get to that weight.
Brilliant. Okay, so it's just like it's basically programming. So there's no disruption on their day, but they're still making progression outside of the work. In the football. And
it's a lot of things that, like, I call them my everyday athletes, but the people that so footballers, ice hockey players, netballers, I have a ton of netball clients, that, you know, especially when we're younger, even if we're not doing this as a full-time job, you just think all the time about going to your training session and competing on the day. That, this is when the strength and conditioning coaches come into their own, that the work we do on those other days are as important, because we're going to be able to jump faster, jump higher, run faster, work on the flexibility to be able to do those moves, core balance, which is important with any coordinated game.
But you would, what I'm also trying to get for the audience to understand, you would still have them doing a very, like, hard, overloading session, you know, something that's tough, at least kind of once a week.
Yeah, absolutely. I work with a lot of sports teams where either we do that as a 1-day thing other than their actual normal training session, or for the lower levels, I will come in once every couple of weeks and take over the majority of their training session, and that's the stuff that we will do. And then in the hope that then that they can use that and put that in their normal sessions every week.
Right, okay.
But yes, it is important, because when we get to the higher level, if we're talking about football, you're not doing fitness in your skills sessions, but you still need to work on fitness.
100%, yeah. Okay, cool. I get it. So, and then it's just as important. They've done their hard session of the week, and I think I'll probably talk about something similar. But it's just as important for them to understand that they need to be still, just because like a lot of people only show up for the hard days because they think that's the important stuff.
Yeah.
But it's just as important to get, and I've used this word a lot, and I should probably never use it, but I say riffraff work sometimes, but that's also the important stuff too, and we can still apply, just because it's not as intense, or there might not be as a chunky amount of work in there, we can still apply progression in those, albeit lighter sessions.
Yeah, so when we're talking about the riffraff work in terms of what I do, that is the flexibility, that is the mobility. But it is so important. We just I put it on like the lighter days for the point that you can recover much faster from it. But that complements the work that we do on the hard day, but it equally complements the competition day.
Which is the primary goal.
Which is the primary goal.
Yeah.
But it's just, when we're talking about the plyometrics, the agility, the strength work, that's much more physically taxing, that it then is held at a higher kind of esteem level.
Okay, bro.
But it is quite, like, this is a very difficult topic for kind of me to talk about. It's like trying to put in like years and years of what I've done into like a quick snippet. Because there's so many multifaceted elements that you're trying to put in one program.
Yeah, and some of it, I say this to my clients sometimes, some of the decisions that I make aren't like, the textbook said that you should do 4 sessions a week. It's like intuitive. It just feels right. It feels that, oh my God, actually, performance is slipping, biofeedback's not great, there's just something doesn't add up. Let's just, let's have an easier day, let's have a stretch day, whatever. And it's that intuition. But back to, like having all these tools, arranging your program correctly, biofeedback, heart rate monitor, like it's not just intuition, it's actually painting a picture. And then the final decision, what feels like intuition, isn't actually intuition. It's just you've made this decision like cognitive of everything else. You know what I mean?
I mean, we've kind of digressed into programming, but if you're one of those people that just, does your workout every day and hasn't really thought about what you're doing, why you're doing it, then you need to really look into programming. There's so many people out there, I think, oh, you're so fit, you're really quite strong, but if I could program you, or if you could go away and program yourself, it will transform your training.
I mean, that is like the amount of times I've had somebody come to me and they're telling me, they're doing this. I'm like, oh, great. They're doing some great stuff. And like, you almost think, well, right, okay, this is good. I'm like, but it's structure that they lack. Like, it's not just, in the more elite you get, it's not structure of a week that's important. It's structure of a whole month, year, like whatever. But it's structure that they lack. And I think, like you say, if they looked into, actually how you program methodically, and like you say, back to actually think about what's the day or whatever it is, what's the most important, the goal in mind. So if the goal is by the start of the season, I've got an athlete that's very weak, they're actually really cardiovascular adapted, they're really fit, but they're very weak, and they've got a date in mind, then way before that date, at the start of their, pre-season, they can work a lot on strength. And just that message of, like, look, take a step back a sec. Don't just keep showing up to the gym and working hard.
No.
Take a step back and actually look at what it is, you need, where it is you need to be, and just actually think, right, this is what I want, and I'm here, how do I get there? and with the time in between, the time it's going to take. So.
And it kind of going back to the whole point of this video with the programming is you program your rests in.
100%, yeah. or if you like say, if you're Arnold Schwarzenegger, you train every day, but doesn't need to rest.
Yeah. I mean, he's just a machine, isn't he?
Yeah, just a machine.
He is the Terminator.
Well, yeah, I suppose he could be a robot. So
yeah, there we go. He doesn't take rests.
Yeah, it doesn't take rest for his mere humans.
Yeah,
that is, if you're human and you're not a robot, then you might have to think otherwise. Yeah, you need rest. I think actually that follows on. I think programming for hypertrophy, I think a lot of clients come to me for the hypertrophy strength stuff. A lot of it's similar to what Hannah's just said. They might have a set competition day, or they might have a holiday, or whatever it is that they want to be in shape for. Or someone comes to me and says, Dan, I want to work with you for 12 weeks, and in 12 weeks I want to be in the best shape possible. So then at least we have an end date. And it's not always that an end date's important. I stress the importance to people that, training for life is, the most important thing. Training to... Like, if someone's come to me for 12 weeks, the conversation I have with them at the start is, you're doing this for 12 weeks for me, but in 12 months, I don't even want to know you. Not that sounds really awful, but... but I actually have this conversation with them, and I say, I don't even want to know you, but I want to bump into you, and I want to know that you're still fit, you're still healthy, you're still doing the right practices that get you... Because otherwise, my job was not worthwhile doing. You didn't learn anything from the experience. But in terms of structuring programming, I think a lot of people could listen to this. I massively think that for bodybuilders, people that want to build muscle, there's a massive loss in understanding. I think we all think, and I've already talked about how I've been there, got the t-shirt, so I'm there with you, anyone listening, but we all think that the more you train and the more you just tear that muscle, the more that you'll grow. And there's some truth to that. The more that you can train and recover from, being the caveat to that, the more that you can recover from, you're normally more likely to get results. And a phrase that I describe the most effective hypertrophy program is the most amount of volume you can accumulate, that's effective volume, and recover from. Without the recovery, it doesn't matter how much volume you do. But anyway, laying out a week. I mean, I can give you an example in my clients training, my own training. Frequency is a big player. If you're trying to get strong, don't expect to squat once a week and be really strong at squats. Now, what happens though? I'm going to say something here that might go against the grain. What happens is you hear the world champion squatter squat maximally once a week, right? Now, please understand, he did not squat maximally once a week to get to that point. He did now because, some of the world's strongest squatters are squatting over 400 kilos. There's no way that he can do that more than once a week. God, you'd have to have 400 kilos on your back and you'd feel fatigued. So part of what's lost in the bodybuilding world, I think they need to take they need to take some understanding from the strength community, and that is that not every session should be heavy and hard. And for me as a bodybuilder, not that I don't like to call myself as a bodybuilder, but trying to build muscle, my game got better with clients when I understood how to get stronger, and how to get stronger well, and by the way, anyone listening, if you go hard in every session because one of the reasons is, you think working hard is better than and being the hardest worker in the room, kind of scenario, you're missing out on something. If you're going hard every session, the likelihood is you're working suboptimal all the time, especially where bodybuilding is concerned. Now, there's some things, probably some sports or whatever, that you can get away with that, perhaps, but for me, when it comes to bodybuilding, there needs to be the frequency element. So you do need to, say squats for instance, if you want to get better at squatting, most people listening to this would bode well doing twice a week. Most people, I can say that off the top of my head, most people, if they're not squatting at least twice a week, they're not going to be getting really good at squats. They might establish some beginner gains and, get the ball rolling, but once they've hit limits that their body's kind of where real adaptation exists, And this is one of the things I explain about, and Hannah just talked about, you know, people come to you and they're already doing the right things. They're already training pretty hard. They're already pretty disciplined. It's the structure that they lack. And this is, though, that element is like, people think beginner gains, so when you're adding 5 kg to the bar every week, is, well, not maybe, say 2.5 kg to the bar every week, is something that should stop when you get more elite. And there's some truth to that, but because it should get harder. Like, you can't just, you know what I mean? If we expect to put 2.5 kg every week, in a year's time, you will be the strongest person that's around. But that's not going to happen unless you will. Unless you're lucky enough to be the...
Unless you're Arnold Schwarzenegger. Then
unless you're Arnold Schwarzenegger.
You can always put 5 kilograms on the bar every week.
Yeah, I'm sure. But unless you're lucky enough to do that, then, you know what I mean? But it doesn't mean that gains should slow down. Now, if you're somebody that is listening to me and you think that gains should be only made when you're a beginner, and they describe them as beginner gains, which has loads of truth. You know, whenever we start something for the first time, we adapt quickly. But the reason we adapt is that more neuromuscular, that learning process. We learn the movement much more than we actually are adapting from the movement. You know what I mean? It's our neural pathways, the motor neurons that are learning the movement to do the movement that are adapting. Our body's actually figuring out the movement. It's not the muscles that we're all interested in, really, that are actually adapting. I think an example, you mentioned it because it was interesting, and it's because fortunately, you know, I had you to work with Xander, and I saw both sides kind of thing, because you went, what did you say? Xander's concerned some of the sessions aren't that hard or something. I can't remember.
Yeah.
And I was like, my straight immediate line, there was nothing else. I was like, don't worry, it's coming.
Yeah,
I said,
and
don't
it
worry,
did.
it's coming.
It
and
did.
it did, and it hit him hard. And because the point is like, initially, Xander, his muscles weren't adapting so much as his neural pathways were adapting. He was learning the squats, to squat with a bar at heavy load. He was learning the deadlift to brace his core, like create that intra-abdominal pressure, like the feet contact, how close the bar is, like the physics of the movement. He was learning all this, and then once learning it, you know, his body's like, right, we're actually getting used to this. I understand the movement. Now there's an opportunity for muscles to adapt.
And
a big clue here. Sorry, Hannah.
No.
A big clue is when, and this is exactly for Xander, and this is what I mean by, this is an exact example of taking how structured program will take you to the next level, is if you're adding 10 kg to the bar every week, you're not getting stronger, really. Believe me, I know it, technically, from a technical standpoint, you are. Like, you know, technically you've lifted more weight, and that's actual strength. But really, you're learning the movement. If you do that several weeks for 8 weeks, like, it's only at week 8 you're really adapting. And I see it with clients. Sometimes they're learning the movement so much, and they've put so much weight on the bar, I'll say, look, in 4 weeks, don't expect to make massive improvements, because you're just learning the movement at this point. The adaptation exists, and this goes for life, forget training, is when we're squeezing the needle, when we're doing that little bit more than we've previously done before. And that's when, like Xander started to feel it, when we were squeezing the 2.5 on the bar. It wasn't when we were putting the 5 on, when we were putting the 10 on. And yeah, so I've gone off the point again, but you know, you were going to say something, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say that also, Zan's kind of what we're talking about with the training that you would do with me, Dan was doing a super focused training with him. Now, for Zand, when he's doing a strength session, we don't always go right to the top end. And also we're using different training methods where I'm trying to put different levels of fatigue on. So Zand actually had to learn what is my biggest output. And also, like, Dan will tell you this, that, like, he didn't know, like, he could always do 10 more. He could always do 10 more.
Yeah.
That we were trying to get to that point with him where he couldn't do 10 more. That was it.
Yeah, a couple of really interesting points here. And I think this is a bit of a takeaway message for a few people, is, like, when Xander first started with me, he, like, was fidgeting. Like, he'd do a set, And he'd be like, come on then, Dan, what's next? What's next? I'm like, chill out a minute, just wait, because there's no chance, that you're going to be, ready. And this is the point about, this is where bodybuilding's lost. And I think that so many so-called people that are bodybuilders do, and it comes from, your Arnold Schwarzeneggers, your, like, Mr. Olympias, because they, for me, execute it in a way that works for them. If you're coming from a position of a natural bodybuilder, the importance is lifting more weight through more reps over time. Now, if you're not lifting more weight through more reps over time, and you're doing what I call junk volume or trash volume, which is basically where, like, you think you're the hardest worker in the room, because you might be doing more reps than everybody else, but you're not resting enough that you can beat previous efforts last week. And, like, Xander needed that rest in order to beat himself last week. Like, and I think, back to, like, that goes for how you should structure your whole program. Like, I've just said that a good example is people should squat twice a week for most people listening, and it'd be a good place to start for most people, which is right. But if you're going absolute all-out max stuff twice a week, there'll be a few people listening that will get away with that for several reasons, because they're well adapted at training hard, or it might be that they're not well adapted at training hard, and that they can't increase that much fatigue within that one squat session that they recover pretty quickly and can do it again. But for, like, Xander, he could at day one, really. He did his session day one. It made no sense for him to do all-out max stuff later in the week, because all that would happen is he might get away with it for, say, 2 weeks. He would squat really heavy again, and then maybe, even the Monday after squatting heavy twice the week before, increase previous efforts. The problem is, he'd done that, increased fatigue, and all the while, fatigue's increasing, while strength is it's a false story, because you're painting yourself a false story, because you're getting stronger in the short term, but then fatigue became so high that you couldn't continue getting stronger. And all I say about getting stronger is about your average weight going up in the gym, and that's like a lesson for all of us in the gym. Is like, you're playing the long game. Like, you're not interested in PRing every week. You're interested in PRing in 8 weeks from now, and you need to structure your program in order to do that. So, like, if a bro joins you in the gym and you just, like, do 2 hours of training and you can't move your arms and it's affecting your bench the next day, and that's where you really want to go heavy, that's a problem. So yeah, sorry.
No, it's completely, that's what we're trying to kind of put to the point of. That, what Dan is doing is completely different to when you're doing, I don't know, something with me, that I might sometimes give you 5 minutes rest, or whenever you feel like your heart rate's come down and you're ready to go again. However, sometimes I might give you no rest before I make you do another thing, because it's different. We're trying to achieve a different outcome from it. So don't think that you're working smart if you're trying to achieve hypertrophy by not giving yourself any rest because it's harder. Because by me doing that in the gym with a session, I'm not actually trying to get my client to put on muscle mass.
Yeah. It's also like this, and this is why, like, if you look at some of the content that me and Hannah put out there, it's these individual elements that go into much detail. It's like me saying that 5 minutes rest is the right go-to is wrong, because sometimes for hypertrophy it's appropriate to, like, if you're doing calves, I use this example a lot, but it's a very good one. If you're doing calves and you do a set of calf raises and you're resting 5 minutes between sets of calf raises, that's a problem. You're either really like you're like pre-diabetic, really unfit. There must be so many issues if you're doing, like, you just need to rest 15 seconds. Like, it's understanding that, like, if you want bigger calves, train them, do a set, 15, 30, maybe a minute. If you're waiting longer than a minute between calf sets, like, you're probably waiting too long, because they're so, the blood flow to them is so good, and really, no one needs to be the world's strongest calf lifter. Like,
you're also only working your calf. So when we're talking about compound moves, where you're using more than one muscle group, deadlifts, you're using the most muscles in any move, so you need more rest.
Yeah. It's and the weight lifted, like, calves won't lift as much weight as a deadlift. So, like, it's all these players, But the biggest thing is you need to structure your training so you're spreading the load over the week, spreading the intensity over the week. So, I've given you a good example: squat twice a week, bench twice a week's good, deadlift depending who you are, but most cases actually once a week, heavy, the real heavy type stuff. And don't be confused as well. This is a big problem, I think, when people hear what I've just said, is they'll maybe, if they say lift twice a week, they squat heavy once a week, and then they do a trashy light day for their other squat day. The problem then is it has no specificity, because then you're doing 8 reps, say, or let's say like a hybrid, like a 6 rep type, which is like in between that strength paradigm and the hypertrophy stuff. It's that kind of middle ground. So you're doing 6 reps on a Monday at all out max stuff. You're doing 4 sets of 6 at your 9 RPEs, 10 RPEs, which is the real tough type stuff. Then later on in the week, you go, oh, Dan said do that light. So now I'm doing sets of 12, and I'm doing it on, I'm doing 100 kilos at the start of the week, and I'm doing 40 kilos at the end of the week, and doing some absolute trashy stuff. Then it has no specificity, and it won't help out on the next Monday that comes around. So, back to the structure with Hannah's program and my programming, like, the light days still has to be specific to the goal. It's not an opportunity for you to go, oh, actually, let's just do some junky type trash volume where I just do several reps. Because then, it doesn't... a good example would actually be doing sets of 6 later in the week, just at a lighter weight and a little bit less volume. If you're doing 5 sets on the Monday, do 3 sets on the Friday or the Thursday, and then do those 3 sets at an RP 6. So your 100 kg is now 75 kg, and that 75 kg is now a lot less intense, but it's still building muscle. And it's still training it because you're doing 6 reps still, so that system, the cardiovascular system, is still similar to that 6 rep max that you did previous in the week. So it's still training the same system. So
also looking at the program Dan did for Zand was like a really good reminder for me when Dan's talking about specificity. I always struggle to say this word.
Specificity.
Can you say, yeah.
Specificity? You're asking the most illiterate person.
No, you were right. I'm very bad with anything that's got
I think it's right.
You're definitely right. It's just noises for me. So Zand would have the same exercises on a lot of days. Now, if you're going to do a training plan with me and your goal is not obviously hypertrophy, and I wouldn't recommend you come to me because you're not going to get as good results as if you go to Dan. But
sure you would.
I'm not going to put a Roman deadlift in 3 sessions a week. You'll have a deadlift, then you'll have a B stance deadlift, and then you'll have a straight leg deadlift. Because I'm trying to achieve something different. However, when Dan's saying about this, it's because if you're a power lifter, that is what you're going to compete in. So there's no point in doing a different deadlift.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think understanding that specificity is key, and whatever it is you're doing should be geared towards the specificity of that. And if you want to get stronger, say if you want a 1 rep max on the bench to go up, the most specific thing you could be doing for that 1 rep max on the bench press, believe it or not, is 1 rep max on the bench press. So that means that if you're wanting your 1 rep max, if anyone's listening to this, honestly, people need to hear this, because I see this mistake being made so often. They want to improve their 1 rep max and they're doing sets of 8s in the gym. They're 2 different skills. Even as the exact same movement, I describe exercises as different skills. You know how you're saying, different types of deadlifts. And a deadlift is a skill. But not only is a deadlift a skill, 5 reps on a deadlift is a different skill to 1 rep on a deadlift. And if you're always doing 1 reps on the deadlift, your body will adapt to doing 1 rep on the deadlift. And if you're trying to improve 1 rep on the deadlift, it's probably a lot of your training should be made up of 1 reps on the deadlift. It doesn't have to be, don't get me wrong, it doesn't have to be all right max stuff, because if you had any sort of thought about it, if you're always, you wouldn't be able to, well, it wouldn't be all right max stuff. If you're doing several singles, they probably wouldn't be actual true singles anyway. But, it's back to that kind of, think about what it is you're working, and remember that everything that you do has to be somewhat specific.
I'm giving it to you now. There's noise.
It's tough, isn't it?
Just don't think about it. That's where I go wrong.
And it has to be suited. There you are, another word. Suited to your goal. And if it's not suited towards your goal, then why are you doing it, I suppose?
And just a little quick added extra when Dan's talking about 1 rep maxes. I always describe this to someone. If you've never lifted, and I'm just going to say 50 kilograms, if you've never lifted 50 kilograms, your brain doesn't know how much load that's going to require. So how many things we need to send, to be able to lift that. We don't know, so we guess. Or we'll say, a really good, everyday example is if you bend down to pick up a bucket and you suddenly pick it up and it flies up, it's because we think, our brain has thought that that's going to be a lot heavier than it is. And it's the same principle with lifting something for 1 rep, that you have to practice how much that you need to recruit in your muscles, how much energy to be able to lift that. That doesn't happen once.
I mean, if I've got a client of mine that comes to me from an endurance background and they're interested in getting singles improved, right, they've got no chance, zero chance of doing all-route max singles. They just won't fatigue. Back to Xander, actually.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. That he can always do 10 more reps when you're working like that.
And that's it, because Xander's 5 rep on the bench, I think when starting, was 50 kilos, and his 10 rep max was 52 kilos. There's no difference, and that's the point. Is they're depending where you're coming from and what you're trying to improve. But a takeaway message in terms of periodization when it comes to hypertrophy, and a big takeaway message to anyone listening, is that if you're trying to get the most jacked and you want to be the most muscular, doing hypertrophy, you straight 8 to 12 reps, should it be hypertrophy? That's the discussion entirely. But if that's your set rep ranges you're doing, and that's what you follow, and you do that all year round, 12 months of the year, because that's hypertrophy, that's a problem. You need to be doing some points where you're working strength, some points where you're doing the really metabolite, 15 rep plus stuff. It actually pays to be doing periodizing the training and getting, because if you improve your 1 rep max to 100 kg, that means that you can do more when you go back down to sets of 5s, which is going to build more muscle. I think I rounded it off quite nice. I don't know.
That, I think, is probably, if anybody has any questions, if there's something that we've talked about and you think, I really want them to go into more detail, send us a message, comment, and we can do that. Because I don't know if Dan finds this, especially when we go into something like programming, we're trying to kind of give the top liner of stuff of years and years of what we do, and it's really, really difficult. Yeah, and actually, it's kind of maybe easier if you kind of give us a bit of a heading by posing a question that we can answer and not digress as much as we like to do. And
I love this. I'm sure Hannah loves it just as much. I hope so. We love just chatting. So fire every question away for me. I'll happily answer anything. I love doing this.
Yeah,
and I actually think it's a good opportunity for people to learn. So.
Yeah, no, definitely. And like I said, it's just a nice chat for me and Dan. We don't get to chat with each other that often. So.
Yeah, and the people are hopefully going to see two sides to, two opinions on maybe the same subject.
Yeah, definitely. So our hope is that we're going to do more sort of videos like that. So we've got some quite exciting ones sort of planned in the future. But if there's anything you want us to do, again, just send us a message. Also go and check out Dan's YouTube. He's got so many videos. I love his Whiteboard Wednesdays. So they're just really quick videos that are really informative. So go and check those out.
Yeah, please do. It's actually, I've really enjoyed it. Hannah, thanks for
inviting me very welcome. Dan always reminds me to do this, but make sure that you subscribe.
Please subscribe to Hannah's channel. It's, she's abundance of energy. And if you just come on for her smile, then, you know, you will cheer you up.
Thanks. Right, guys, we'll catch up with you later. Hope you have a lovely rest of your day, whatever you're doing. See you later.
See you later.